How's everyone's day going?
Great.
Great.
So we're just gonna stare at each other like that? Like
We can talk.
There
we go. Broke the silence.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Stefan.
I was just asking because
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just making sure we're good. And we are live on Facebook as well. Sweet. I guess we will keep the polls going, or should I just turn it off?
Can leave it on, I guess.
Cool. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for joining our webinar. We're so happy to have everyone here today. My name is Sam Rayner. I am the Industry Development and Membership Coordinator for the Canadian Independent Music Association, aka CIMA. Last week, we gave our land acknowledgement that was dedicated to Toronto and the GTA region. And it was pointed out that this is a national platform with a national audience. And with deep respect, we would like to honor, acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations across Canada. This is our second week of the 10-part series, and there's been so many positive things that have come out of this of the first conversation, which was systemic and systematic racism, a discussion on anti-Black racism in the entertainment industry that can be, and that was great, and it can be viewed on BDRB.ca website or on our CIMA YouTube channel or Facebook. And I believe we have almost 4,000 views on that, which is incredible, and we're so happy with the attendance. And that was actually the most attended event that CIMA has ever done for webinars, and that's awesome, and it's super incredible. But it's really important we get as many people on this and listening to these conversations as possible. So if you missed that one, you can jump on Facebook or you can go to the website. And just to kind of give you some information about CIMA, we are a trade association, and so we represent the interest of the independent industry in the perspective of companies' bases. So our membership ranges from record labels to management groups to publishers to artists who run and organize their own career. And so we represent the industry in many ways. Our main thing is advocacy. We do export. Currently, we aren't doing export right now, but our third thing that we do a lot of is professional development. And so that's why this is one of the reasons why we're participating, or why we're facilitating this event right now. And as our nation and the entire world has come to grapple with the structures and behaviors that support anti-Black racism, CIMA has been made aware of our lack in leadership in ensuring that the industry we strive to represent on a national level properly reflects the many diverse communities that participate and contribute to our sector. And as a first step on to the long road towards establishing an equitable and inclusive industry, this series has been designed for everyone. So businesses, artists, music industry associations like CIMA, for us to listen and to learn from the lived experiences of Black working professionals we work with every day. And I have to say it, but the development and execution of this 10-part series owes it's a lot and everything to the contribution of Dave and Ian, who are on this conversation, and they will be on each conversation to help facilitate and secure. They were the ones who secured the speakers and ensured the discussion points and the discussion topics, and without them we would not have been able to do this. And a really big thanks to CIMA's administrative coordinator, Matthew Baidu, for his assistance on the entire series as well. And I just have to give a shout out to our supporters as well. So Advance is participating and is partnering in all of our 10 episodes, and as well as we're trying to, for each event, each episode, we're trying to get other associations and organizations part of the conversation. And so with our supporting partners, Factor and Ontario Creates, on this specific episode. And so if there's any other organizations that want to participate in this and help get as many people to watch and view and learn and listen from these conversations, please let me know. My email is on a lot of the kind of content, or a lot of the applications or registrations, so you can reach out to me, but it's samr@cimamusic.ca. And just also acknowledge the Government of Canada and Factor and Ontario Creates for their the funding organizations that make our association possible. So I'd just like to pass on a few words from our president from CIMA for additional remarks.
Thanks very much, Sam, and thank you to everybody for being here. And I can tell you I'm very honored to be here today. I do have to state for the record that CIMA is indeed committed to positive change. Myself, my team, and most importantly, our board of directors, we're all intent on making authentic and meaningful changes. But we know, there's a lot of work to do on our part. I can tell you that we've already been making structural changes internally. We will be making changes to our governance structure, to our committees. And ultimately, really what it comes down to for us, I think, is we need to ensure that all of our members, both present and future, as well as the broader industry, that we're all part of the process, that everyone can see themselves reflected in our programs, in our services, in our governance, and our committees. And, we're intent on creating mentorship opportunities. And, we do want to recognize and promote success and excellence across the music industry and across the music community, including those underrepresented in the Black community and people of color, Indigenous, the LGBTQ plus community. So we are making this pledge for true, authentic change because, it's long overdue, and frankly, it's the right thing to do. And part of that process is us listening to the community. Outreach, dialogue, and listening will be the key to our collective success, which is in part why we are doing this 10-part series with our good partners at Advance. Going forward, we know we may make mistakes because we are still learning, but we are counting on you and others to constructively help us out on this journey. And as I said, we are committed to making all of this happen. So I wanted to thank everyone on this web series. I want to thank our panelists, and of course to our colleagues at Advance. So personally, I'm very much looking forward to listening and being educated on all of these important issues today, and in the next, what do we have, 8 parts after today. So thank you for allowing me to speak today, and Click, I guess that's over to you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. And just to echo about Advance, when we first, me and Ian started coming up with this concept along with Sam and Matt, and Advance hadn't really announced what they were doing at the time. But as soon as I, started sitting on some phone calls with some people, I felt like Advance is a great place and a great ally and great to bring into the mix in terms of like making sure that our industry and our community and us know about there is a place for us. And I'm excited about what they're doing over there. And if you have not signed up, I highly recommend signing up. Their website is advancedmusic.org. And I think it's important that everybody, doesn't matter if you're, an artist that's an entrepreneur, if you're a lawyer, if you're an inspiring record label exec, whatever it is that you may want to be, this is a place that you can come and hopefully build, your goals and align with people from the industry. That's what it's really about. So when I got together, Ian, I said this last time on the last panel, this really came out of my frustration of watching a lot of Americans on Zooms. It seemed like every day I turn on my phone and I'm seeing a Zoom meeting by executives in America. And I was like, dude, like we have an industry of people here on the ground doing the work, but we don't really speak enough to each other. We don't really get into spaces like what we're doing right now to actually talk about the industry that we're in, not the American industry. It's a totally different landscape. And if we want to build a stronger infrastructure, it starts with communication. So I'm going to throw it to Ian and let Ian share a couple of things, and then we're going to get on to some great combos. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ian Andre Espinay, and alongside with Click, I am the co-producer and curator of the Breaking Down Racial Barriers panel discussion. This, as I'll reiterate, is a 10-part panel discussion on anti-Black racism in the music entertainment community. This is a conversation specifically on anti-Black racism in the Black community, in the entertainment community. And over the next 9 weeks, or 8 weeks rather, we will tackle areas that face and barriers that face Black people in all aspects of the industry. Today, we will be unpacking economics, the economics of anti-Black racism across all aspects and facets of the community. But before we start, I would like to take a moment of silence for the loss of a great, iconic and pivotal Canadian music legend, Miss Salome Bay. I would like to make a moment of silence and send our condolences to the family and community. Thank you. It's an immense loss. If you're not familiar with Salome Bay, she is coveted as the First Lady of Blues, but she is a pivotal part of Black Canadian history and Canadian history as a whole. It shouldn't even be Black Canadian history, and it's a huge loss to the community. So I would like to, at this point, introduce our speakers. I would like you all to introduce yourselves and then finally throw to our great moderator Jay Damadish, who will control the conversation. Myself and Click will also be present throughout. Thank you, and thank you for joining us, everyone. Gail? Unmute, please.
Hi there, good afternoon. My name is Gail Phillip, and I am the Manager of Client Services for Factor. The Foundation Assisting Canadian Talent on Recording is a public and private partnership that supports the production of sound recordings by Canadian musicians, as well as helping Canadian music companies make recordings available to the wider public. And I'm very happy to be here. Look forward to our conversation.
Okay, Whitney?
Hi guys, bonjour. I'm from Montreal. Yes, sir. So my name is Whitney Bonfils. I work with, yes, Stéphane. I work with SOCAN. SOCAN is Canada's largest music rights organization. I work in the membership department, and more specifically, I'm an E&R executive for the Quebec region. And I'm happy to be here, and looking forward to this conversation.
Sorry, Aisha.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Ian. My name is Aisha Wickham. I'm a program consultant with the Ontario Music Office at Ontario Creates. Ontario Creates is an agency of the provincial government, the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture Industries. I also bring a background from the broadcasting industry. I was part of the team that launched Flow 93.5 way back at the turn of the millennium, the turn of the century. So I'm going to be bringing a radio perspective to the conversation as well, and just an artist development mindset. So really looking forward to the conversation.
Amara.
Hi everyone, my name is Amara Wogu. I lead business operations at Atil Faint, which is a management company. My background is in municipal politics, corporate, sponsorship, and nonprofit, but all kind of well suited in the entertainment industry. So yeah.
Stéphane?
Yes. So I'm a lawyer based in Montreal. I'm the director of legal and business affairs at PHI. It's an arts and culture institution. My background is that of an artist. I was a singer-songwriter with Brand Van 3000. I also have experience in governance in cultural boards. I sit on the Conseil des Arts et des Lettres du Québec board, and I have a little bit of a politician in me. So, you know.
And before I throw to our great moderator, Mr. Jay Devonish, I just want to do some quick housekeeping. Anyone who is watching, you can register at B, like breaking D down, racial barriers.ca, BDRD, BDRB.ca for one episode or all 10. And now I'm going to throw to Jay Devonish, our moderator. Thank you.
Hey everybody, Jay Devonish here. I'm director of A&R at Entertainment One, based in Toronto. I also teach the business music program at the Remix Project here in Toronto. And I have a grant writing and administration team, DMC, which helps artists and entrepreneurs secure funding. And yeah, I wanted to welcome everybody to this panel. I think this is a great thing that we're doing and getting into the economics today of the industry. We're kind of going to go in three main topics that we're going to kind of focus on, which is the first being revenue streams and earning revenue, the second being grant funding, and lastly, corporate sponsorship and endorsement. There'll probably be some synergies amongst the three, but that's kind of how we're going to structure it. And glad to have our great guests on here. So the first thing I just want to do before we jump into some of these questions and getting some of the knowledge from some of these speakers is, understanding that Black music is pop music, and the Canadian Black music is now having a major impact on the global music scene. Black IP is valuable in Canada. In this new era, we've seen acts Drake, The Weeknd, Tory Lanez, Kaytranada, Daniel Caesar, Party Next Door, Division, Glammy 88, the list goes on, that are having successful international careers. Even our producers like Boy Wonder, Wonder Girl, 85, Kaytranada, High Classified, we're seeing are getting some major placements. And obviously a lot of the non-Black Canadian producers who are influenced by Black music like 40, Murder Beats, and Frank Dukes are literally shaping the US music scene and the US and international music sound. So when we're talking about the economics of Black music, there is a strong value in here, and it's important that the Canadian industry is investing in developing that. So that's what we're really going to get into. And start this portion talking about revenue streams and how to build sustainable business and some of the systemic changes or challenges that we face. So I'm going to start with Whitney and jumping into some revenue streams and how artists are getting money. So obviously there's rights with your master and sales through your traditional streaming and physical product. But I thought, Whitney, maybe you could talk about the royalty collection organizations that exist in Canada and their role.
Sure. So when you think about music creators and the rights are associated with it, there are mainly, I would say, three main rights: so performance, mechanical, and neighboring rights. So the three organizations that cover for music creators these rights would be SOCAN, ReSound, and CIMA. There are other organizations, don't get me wrong, but those are the main ones that covers the basics, I would say, for music creators. The role is really simple. Like, a lot of organizations are doing a lot of great things, but their basic role is to collect royalties and to pay royalties to the right owners. So that's basically what it comes down to.
And how does it work? How does somebody collect from these agencies and these organizations? How do artists or managers work to sign up and start collecting these royalties?
I think the first step is you have to understand the industry that you're in. You have to understand the rights that are attached to your craft, right? Once you know that, you know which organization you need to be talking to. So once you identify this organization, you have to become a member. of these organizations. And then you have to follow the process in which you're going to get paid. So, for example, for SOCAN, when you become a SOCAN member as a music creator, you have to, or a publisher actually, you have two main jobs. You have to declare your song. You have to let us know that you wrote these songs or that you published these songs. And you have to declare basically any type of concert or venues that you've been at. So we can actually pay you based on the consumption of your art and so on. Yeah. So those are basically the main responsibilities that you have when you join these organizations.
And again, to recap for everybody, and let's go over those organizations so everybody can do their research. SOCAN, CMRA, and Resound.
Exactly.
Right?
Those are the main ones. Yeah.
Those are the main ones.
I should say in Quebec, there's like, there are two other organizations that, handle neighboring rights called Artisti and SOPROC. So depending on if you a singer or a performer or a right owner, basically like a producer, a label, your own label, you can join these organizations in Quebec also. Resound is more like the Canadian entity.
Yeah. Okay. And what are the main revenue sources of these royalty payments? How are people seeing nice checks from?
So again, I'd say the main ones would be radio, for sure. Would be the streaming platforms and venues. So obviously in 2020, venues are not hot. We can really go see concerts and everything, but radio, streaming, and venues would be the three main ways for people to get paid from a royalty standpoint.
And when we talk about radio, I think that segments really well into many of the issues that are affecting Black people and what we're collecting and making because of the dynamic of radio in Canada as well. Whereas in the US, there's an urban station, urban AC station, and a CHR station in every major city. Here, it's a lot more limited. I know, Aisha, Gail, you also have experience in the radio, and I'd love to hear any of your thoughts on that side of things and collecting the royalties, radio royalties.
If I could start sort of with going back a bit in terms of future conversation is when Flow 93.5 launched in 2001, it was the first Black-owned commercial radio station in Canada of more than 400 commercial FM stations in the country. I think the evolution of the Canadian music industry was birthed out of the structure of CanCon to develop, as at the starting point, 30% of radio stations' playlists to be Canadian in order to protect Canadian culture from our neighbors to the south and to have a healthy balance of Canadian and American music. But the outcome of that in terms of the number of radio stations focused on genres outside of Black music genres resulted in the development of an infrastructure that supported populating those radio stations. So heavily on the rock side, country, other genres that are outside of the scope of what we define as pop music today. And so I feel like the remnants of that exist till this day, although people consume and discover music in different ways. The monetization of commercial radio is still pervasive as a way for labels and managers to decide who they're going to sign or work with. And that's a huge part of the structural issues that we're dealing with today.
Anybody else want to add to the radio?
Absolutely. She said something extremely important. The way the radio genres are distributed throughout Canada don't correspond to the definition of pop music today. Like when you look at the face of major Canadian IP exports in the music industry, we're talking about urban music, Black artists with urban music, or white artists with urban music. So there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect with what we have been doing here and what we continue to do, and with the change that has happened throughout the world. You're talking about millions of dollars that were funneled and siphoned out of Canada to go create wealth outside, where we have, I have the CIMA advocacy lines in front of me right now, created and produced right here in Canada. It's an important national asset, and it's our natural resource. And what we have to make sure is that we recognize and support commercially successful Canadian music on a global basis.
And to add to that point, just to put a fact out there, 3 of the top 5 selling albums this week in Canada are urban records.
So it's important for us, and I think all the questions that are going to be raised here in this panel are crucial to answer. But what's really important is for us to frame the conversation, because the way you frame the conversation will determine the results that we get from it. Like we really have to recognize right now that urban music is a huge part of Canadian music, and we have to take measures. I followed carefully from Mr. Badeau's address, his notes, and he talks about structural changes that will support an equitable and inclusive music industry. Like these, we have to understand that the change has happened, and the music industry is catching up to this change, and we can no longer position ourselves as outside looking in, asking for incremental little percentages and advances. We have to realize that Canadian wealth is at stake here, and we have to take measures for it to stop funneling outside, of Canada. So, I mean,
Canadian industry investing into this Black IP. Is there
at one point we have to recognize that Black IP is Canadian IP.
Yeah.
1000%. And I think one of the solutions to that is an economic impact study. I want to say maybe 2010, Music Canada had commissioned an economic study from Pricewaterhouse. And it basically talked about the millions of dollars that the commercial music industry, just from a recording standpoint, brought into the city. Where if you compare that to the film industry in Toronto, we know that the film industry brings in $2 billion into the city. Why isn't there a study that talks about all of the influences that our Canadian IP, Black IP, brings in? Because when OVO Fest happens, the gas stations are full, the restaurants are full, the hotels are full. Where are all of the economic studies on Caribana and how much those cultural impacts and those things that include music? Where are those studies going? So I think if we could have dollars put in towards data mining for how much our industry brings money into the city and the country, to be honest, I think that's a great point where we need to start.
That's amazing. That's money and also value, because IP, intellectual property, your copyright is your public domain. It's what makes your patrimoine, your heritage. The Canadian Ministry of Heritage, it says so. It's who you are. It's the fabric of your country. So it impacts us in ways that are more valuable than we right now can see, because the conversation, thanks to Aisha putting the table as to how structurally the radio stations were constructed, the conversation always puts us from the outside looking in, trying to affect incremental change. And it's a good thing. We have good news too. Like, for example, at the Calc, we aimed for a very, very long time to make it so that the percentage of diversity in Quebec were reflected in the percentage of applicants from diverse background. And in Quebec, diversity clocks in at 12.5%. And this month we had like beyond 17%. So on paper, those percentages look great. It's amazing. And, we have to, there's a lot of background actionable change that has been effectuated for this to happen, but it kind of evacuates the essential value of what is happening in the world music industry and how Canada contributes to it, at the same time letting it escape its IP base.
I have a question for Whitney. Being at SOCAN and seeing some of these Black songwriters and writers and the type of money that they're generating off their publishing rights, can you give us some examples of some great success stories, and also tell us why if you feel that there is lack of knowledge or there are more Black writers who are not collecting properly their royalties and any solutions, and that's open to the panel.
Yeah.
There, yeah.
Yeah, I'll start by saying that, when we talk from a global perspective of anti-racism, we talk about generational wealth, how to, as people, we can create wealth that will pass on to generation. You have like so many insanely good artists like Shelia. I'm going to talk about, speak Quebec specifics like Shelia, like Malika Tirolien. We talked about I Classified. There is a rap group called 514. You have like people that are aggregating like millions of streams on streaming platforms, on YouTube videos and things like that, but they don't go on radio. And they don't go on radio, so that means that there's a good chunk of money they will never receive. So as an artist, as you're trying to build your career, right now it's difficult to sustain on streaming, revenues. We all hope that it's going to change, but as of now, it's difficult to sustain on that. So you need that the radio revenues to actually develop your craft and grow as an individual. When these artists don't go on radio, you basically cut a portion of their revenues, a portion of their salaries directly. So it impacts the wealth that they can create and pass on to the next generation. So that's definitely an issue. And I think for me, to go back to your question, what is the issue within the music record organization that are affecting these Black people? I would say it's representation that would lead to outreach. Let me explain what I mean. When I joined SOCAN, before I joined SOCAN had identified a gap. I'm talking about the Quebec market again, a gap within its membership. There is not enough, Black music makers being SOCAN members. We're talking about, and especially around the young creators, right? So young hip hop artists, young R&B artists, they did not join SOCAN for some reason. So when I got hired, I'm assuming part of it was that too, was for SOCAN to find a way to approach these communities. When I got hired, we started to reach out to these young creators and to these communities, like I talked about hip hop and R&B, the gospel communities and so on and so forth. And we have been able to bring them back to SOCAN. But did they know about SOCAN before? Maybe not. Did they feel represented by SOCAN before? I don't, maybe not. Did SOCAN reach out to these communities? Maybe not. What I mean by that is because I joined, suddenly they felt more represented or understood, I would say. So the conversation, we've been able to start a conversation as of, hey guys, you are also music creators, so you are entitled to rights. And this is what we do. This is why you have to join. And this is how much money you can bring to your house, right? By joining SOCAN. So I think that from a global perspective, when you think about these different organizations, it is crucial to have representation, Black representation, because it will lead to Black outreach. I know that I have to reach out to the young hip hop guys and to the young R&B, creators. I know that I have to reach out to the gospel communities. I'm assuming if I'm not Black and I don't hang out with Black people, it's going to be difficult for me to be aware of these things, because naturally I will reach out to people that kind of look like me or that listen to the same music than I do. And it's not a crime. I'm not saying they did a bad thing. I'm saying because we have a lack of representation, certain groups don't feel represented, and therefore these organizations have gaps in their membership. Thank God at SOCAN we've been able to kind of fill that gap. With time, I think we still have a lot of room to grow, but we've been able to work towards filling that gap, and we've been pretty successful from a national standpoint at it. But I think representation is the number one problem, because it leads to biased outreach.
And I have to agree with that as a person that worked in radio at G98.7. The license was a specific license, a world beat license, and then there's a strain from the community where everybody wants their music played, but we are limited in terms of what we can play or what they can play at the time because of this restrictions on the license. And then that again creates
Yeah, and I just want to capitalize back on the point that Whitney said, where it's technically not a crime for, if people all look the same and making decisions, but it's not a crime, but it's an issue. It's an issue that the key decision makers are not in tune with the actual culture on the ground for these key budgets. That is, in my eyes, a crime, right? Yeah. Like it's the problem when these brands, corporations, whatever have you not, labels want to maximize off of Black culture and Black IP, but not having any Black people working at the helm. And then when they do have Black people working at the helm, they're not key decision makers who can control those budgets. And then even when they are, there's also restrictions that are not catered to the community. So exactly what Gail just said, you have this license and on the Black community is now, just using an example, vilifying her for not being able to play all of this music, when they don't know that there's pressures and ramifications that happen if you go outside, right? Like, we as Black people are constantly having to make the decision between our livelihood and our well-being. So at what point are the people who are at the helm of policy making, guidelines making, are gonna take out their biases and say, we need to make this suitable for the culture? And I think that's where, for me, it starts: policy and HR criteria and program guidelines. Just being candid, of even a program that I was a part of, creating for funding, it was really hard because some artists had to be in post-secondary school. That's education. That's a barrier. Not everyone has access to higher education. So for me, I think a solution there is an audit. Like, I would love to see an audit of all public, private, whatever corporations that are giving fundings to different communities. Who are you giving your funding to? Is it the National Ballet? Is it the orchestra? Is it the symphony? And are they getting 600,000 in North plus? Because that needs to change.
This raises such an important question. You know why? Because we have a public subsidy system here in Canada. And culture is a public domain. It's your heritage. So people who receive the subsidies have to hold these subsidies in trust because they're custodians of the culture. And to Whitney,
you got it.
I mean, you just made earlier in your address, you were talking about your main source of revenue is radio, but we still don't have an urban radio station in Montreal.
That's the point.
That makes no sense, actually. That makes absolutely no sense. You have people...
So I mean, it's commendable that at the SOCAN you see the problem and you go beyond performative representation, where you put somebody there who can actually effectuate change from the inside. That's really commendable. We have ways to go, because I mean, early on, was Aisha. I was there when Flow 93.5 started. It was a revolution. It was amazing. And 20 years down the line, what you have major, talent coming out of Toronto for the world to see. We still don't have that in Montreal. We don't have one urban radio station, whereas Loud the other day just sold out the Bell Stadium. Go ahead, Ian.
But when you talk about urban radio stations, you talk about G98. G98 is not enough for someone to sustain their livelihood. How? With one radio station, what does the SOCAN check look like?
Again.
And I'd actually like to take a moment to acknowledge a comment in the comments. The CRTC and the federal intervention in the radio licensing gave us CanCon and CCDs. Maybe it's time that we go after license conditions that require airplay for culturally diverse music and Canadian artists, specifically in Canada. What are the...
I like that, but again, as the first point is, we are pop music. They should be doing this because this is what every kid is listening to. So to me, it's not a handout. It's like, this is what the Canadian industry should be doing.
Right.
Yeah, the same way they did it for rock music. When you think about it again, you have like young creators that are filling up stadiums, that are filling up, venues, that are doing millions of streams, and you have people on the radio that haven't like even 1,000 streams on their platform, but they're on rotation, on heavy rotation on radio.
They're supported and they're promoted.
Yeah, so that's an issue.
There's a group, like even Division this week is doing, Black Canadian group is doing a series of shows over at Rebel. And they've got play and hit Urban AC or Urban, I believe Urban AC Radio, some of their singles previously in the US. They've got more play to the US than they do in Canada. And we're our Canadian band, they're selling out here. And again, to this point that in the US, why you're having a lot of rappers being super successful is because they have publishing rights and they're getting played on the Urban AC, and Top 40 station every single city in America. And they're getting played on Sirius XM, which gives more performance royalties. So yeah, go ahead, Whitney.
Sorry, I'm passionate about that because I averaging $80,000 a year from a SOCAN paycheck. You know, he gets $80,000 a year from SOCAN based on radio plays and streaming plays on venue. That artist, in the mind of that individual songwriter, is going to be like, oh, I can actually do that for a living.
Yes.
I can actually, you know, make a living out of that. Huh?
Who?
No, I'm not going to get into giving names, but I can tell you there's a lot of artists and certain Black artists are actually like, you know, making that kind of money. But you have all the young creators that when they get their paycheck from SOCAN, because the only thing that they have is streaming plays, they get $1,000, but they know they have 1 million stream. So they are like, wow, screw this thing. I'm not going to do that for a living. I'm going to go back to the street or go back to get another kind of job, or, you know, and that's where the problem is, because the same rock artist that will make, you know, because he's on radio, has less stream, but he's going to make $200K a year.
A lot of them, yeah.
$200K a year. So of course you're going to keep on building on your craft and investing in your music. So we have to, as a society, give young creators a chance to be successful. They're not asking handouts. We're not talking about handouts or like charity. We're talking about what is due to you based on the fact that you are successful and that hip hop is ruling the music world right now. Period. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and R&B. Like just going back to the Shay Leah point of, this is someone who's on the verge of hitting global looks right now. She's getting global looks and the verge of like global stardom as like a young emerging musician. And systemic structural racism is going to be the cause of why she will then blow up internationally. And then the Junos or something will be like, oh, we want you to perform or come. It's like, it's too late. You didn't support, right? The radio stations weren't supporting, the government bodies, the branding, like, where is it? Everyone has to go outside. Media, like it's a structural problem in each institution, whereas they're all operating like, even though maybe siloed, even if they are working together, we're still excluded from the conversation until we make it. And then we're villainized, right?
At the same time, Amara, I think that
wealth has escaped everyone. So, sorry, Aisha, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. No, I was just going to dovetail on Amara's important point about international success, or artists on the brink of international success. But I think it's important to also talk about the middle class of artists. I worked with the Independent Recording Artists Association for years, and you can make a living making music as long as you can pay your bills. Rent or buy a house off of your art, you can do that. If you're cut out from a big piece of the infrastructure, it prevents you from doing that. Not everybody's going to break out and be an international star, but a lot more artists would be able to be self-sustaining if they had the knowledge base and access to a broader range of infrastructure.
I love what you just said. People don't understand that it is actually an industry. Like the transport industry has different levels to it. It's the same thing for the music. We're all looking at the Drake like they're making millions, but you have other artists that are like you said, Aisha, averaging 100,000. I would like 100,000 a year is a really good salary. I mean, like 50,000 a year is a really good salary. And as you said, Aisha, I love what you said, because if you have more artists that are averaging, instead of averaging 2,000 a year, they're averaging 50,000, then you're going to have more room and for Black creators to exist and create Black wealth. And that's, at the end of the day, what's the most important. That's how we're going to survive as people, is like if we create generational wealth.
Yeah. And you know what, just a quick solution before we move on to the next topic, because I feel we got to get there. Just an example that I've seen is when the Sirius XM implemented their, I believe it's channel 165, their indigenous station. So if your spins on Sirius XM as a performer and the master owner, you get paid out either through resound, sound exchange, et cetera. I've seen a lot of indigenous artists who've made good livings off of the income based on having that one station, you know? So again, if we can create and have more media outlets where these royalties, these companies are paying out royalties to be paid out, it's really, you know, it's crazy that we have the most popular music, hip hop, R&B, and no, not a lot of representation there at radio.
Sorry, can I jump in for a quick second? Because this is a question that never occurred to me prior to this moment. But what is the role of the word urban in the
I got a story
anti-black
about that.
in the anti-black racism of the economics of anti-black racism, in separating our musics from each other and segregating them into radio stations and things of this sort, if any?
I would like to answer that. When we were touring internationally with Capitol Records, the guy who signed us just got finished breaking Nirvana. So he was looking to replicate his success with Brand Van 3000. So, you know, a lot of money was funneled into touring, and Drinking in LA was then trying to get on regular rotation at K-Rock, which was the major alternative radio station at the time. So A or even B rotation would ensure some sort of success. So the single tested well, and then there were a couple of people who rang to say, her voice sounds too urban. And then they called us to the table saying, you know, the single tested well, but it won't be put on rotation because Stefan's voice sounds too urban. And for 3 weeks, I remember being extremely confused. Like, what does urban mean? I live in Boucherville. So I kept asking, so what does urban mean? Urban. And then after 3 weeks of asking, they say urban means black. So it is definitely I don't know what to say to that, and I don't know how to dissociate it from my personal experience. It's just that these words participate with performative representation and to making sure that the existing structures continue to perdure. Like calling music urban is not going to help us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Jay, sorry.
No,
it actually means nothing. When you think about it, like, what does that mean, urban? That means like music that plays in urban cities. Like, it actually means nothing when you think about it. And I think you're right. It's just like the industry being afraid to call it as it is, black music, period. And
about 1,000%. Even when you look at it from a government standpoint, when they talk about urbanization, urban planning, like that's such an ambiguous term for it then to be turned around and racialized and specialized for one group of people.
That for the longest time, I'm like, what is urban? I live in Boucherville. I take the 81 bus. It takes me 45 minutes away from the city. Urban what?
Yeah.
So it's another way to justify.
It's an umbrella term. It's an umbrella term.
And we, to go back to our point, it's about representation, because I guarantee you that word doesn't come a black person.
Yes.
Like, I guarantee you that word,
Perfect.
if in that committee, and it was Big John actually that wrote the first article that was against the urban, word, and I forgot the name of the article and when he wrote it, but he was like, why do we call black music urban? And I guarantee in these communities, people were just like, oh, can we say black music? Can we just say that? And somebody came up with the word urban.
Well, just interrupt.
Representation, man.
I don't want to spend too much time on it, but there is a great article. I've been dying just trying to remember the gentleman's name, but it really came out of radio stations in New York City when the rise of black radio was becoming so popular that the ratings that they were getting were bigger than the average pop stations in New York. And when radio stations wanted to start creating more like a Hot 97s and other stations, it came down to the fact that we can't use the term black radio to help sell advertising. And they used the word urban, and that word is then being traveled over into record companies and everything else that has put us in umbrella, just like Amara said, an umbrella term to kind of play it safe.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
and that's really the unfortunate thing. And that's really just the history of it.
Yeah. So I really want to move along, but you know, it made it more palatable, and the reason that I pointed that out is because it's a huge part in the economics of it, in terms of the way that radio stations play the music, in terms of the way that the books rate the people, and we will get into this in the media episode, in terms of the and Aisha can speak to these things, and the way that the advertisers look at the value of it. And so the feasibility of the radio stations and the artists and sponsorship and endorsements, which we're about to get to, I want to hand it back over to Jay to take it to the next level.
All right. So we're going to jump into the Canadian grant funding and some of the systemic issues that we face there. And first, you know, I think we got to, again, note that as Canadians, we have access to this grant funding, which a lot of countries don't have this access. So this funding that is offered here in Canada is offered from the government plus private funders, and it's basically there for the development of Canadian artists and Canadian music companies. And many of the biggest artists in Canada and the most established independent labels have been accessing this funding for years. There's both development funding for artists and also for record labels, publishers, and management companies. So we're going to get into this today to get a better understanding. We have some great speakers here from Factor and Ontario Creates, where we're going to get into more of what is available, understanding that system, and looking at some of the systemic problems. So I'm going to first kind of throw this to Aisha and Gail. What are the grant funding organizations available in Canada, and who funds them?
I'll start with the federal associations, and Aisha will get into the provincial. So the first would be Factor, Foundation Assisting Canadian Talent on Recording. And Factor is funded by the private radio broadcasters, as well as through the Department of Canadian Heritage through the Canada Music Fund. The Canada Music Fund that we receive is administered through Factor as well as Music Action in Quebec. And there's two components, the individual initiative as well as the collective initiative. So the individual initiative component provides financial assistance to undertake activities that are central to the development of Canadian artists, the promotion of their music, and the expansion of their audience. Example of supported activities under this component include the production and marketing of Canadian sound recordings, domestic and international touring, including showcases of Canadian artists, artist management, publishing of Canadian musical works, as well as business development that you mentioned. And then under the collective initiative umbrella, the component provides financial assistance to undertake activities that help Canadian artists and industry professionals gain a greater profile at home and abroad, increase their artistic and business skills, and build their export readiness and overall competitiveness in the marketplace. Then we also have the Canada Council for the Arts. Canada's public arts funder grants fund activities that contribute to the professional advancement of Canadian artists working in all artistic disciplines. And then we have two more, Radio Star Maker Fund, which is funded by the radio broadcasters. And the fund supports emerging artists with star potential from every region of Canada. The aim is to allocate funding in such a way that has a direct impact on artists and support their marketing and touring initiatives, both in Canada and again, as well as abroad. And then the last one is SOCAN Foundation, which provides grants for Canadian music creators and publishers working to promote appreciation for Canadian music in today's society. The foundation grants support the spread of our music both within Canada and abroad, ensuring our voices are heard all over the world, as well as in our own backyards. So there's a lot of federal funding agencies out here, but I know a lot of people aren't aware of who they are. So I encourage you to please visit those websites and see what you're eligible for.
Aisha?
Hey, I'll keep it pretty high level. I'll start with Ontario Creates. basically all government funders are funded by different levels of government. So Gail covered the federal levels, and on the provincial level, we have Ontario Creates, which it's not just a music funder, it also funds the book and magazine publishing sectors, the digital media sector, and the film and television sectors, both through direct funding through our industry development group, and then on the tax credit side through tax credits for productions that are done in the province. And we're funded, as I mentioned earlier, from the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture Industries of the Government of Ontario. A couple of other government funders provincially are Creative BC and Manitoba Film and Music. So I won't go over sort of their mandates. I encourage everybody to look those up. Additionally, municipally, there are arts councils in many, many cities across the country that are funded by the city government. So Toronto Arts Council, and then again, across the country. I did want to note an important distinction is to understand the difference in focus of each of the funding bodies. So some are more focused on artistic merit, and some are more focused on economic impact. So Ontario Creates is an economic development agency, and it's focused on metrics such as job creation and revenue growth. And so we tend to focus on incorporated companies that are generating a certain level of revenue already, which presents some barriers to entry. And we're more focused on helping companies that are sort of already rolling, help them roll a little bit faster and expand their international reach. But there are entities, across the funding ecosystem that are intended to support artists at every level of their career, from the grassroots artists doing demos all the way up to multinationals through our program.
That's great. And I guess a big question is, how are the policies related to grants, how are they developed? Can you speak about lobby groups? Do we have lobby groups that are and Click, maybe you can talk about Advance, but how are some of these policies instated, and what are things from your experience? I know Aisha, you have a lot of experience in this, and also Amara. Speak a little bit on that, on the policy and the creation of these policies, and how some of these funds are created.
I guess I could start. Because agencies are funded by government, whatever government is in power at the time determines the policy directive that is given to the agencies to enact. So Ontario Creates, formerly Ontario Media Development Corporation, had a music fund for many years prior to the Ontario Music Fund, which many of you may be familiar with, which was a $15 million program that launched in 2013 by the Liberal government. And it was a direct result of collective lobbying from the music industry to expand the program from 1 million a year up to 15 million a year. So Music Canada, as a trade association representing the major labels, came together with CIMA, representing the indies. Of course, they didn't agree on everything, but they came to government with a unified voice, expressing what was needed. And indeed, it was expanded beyond just labels and publishers and managers to then include the live music space. And so, promoters and presenters were able to access funding from our agency for the first time. And so, it speaks to the importance of industry voice going directly to policymakers, which is done at the political level. There's only so much influence we can have on program guidelines because they are set from a policy directive. There are things we can do within that. However, the overall directive comes from the government that's in power at the time and what they determine as priorities.
Could you speak on Advance and kind of, I know this is a new organization, and I'm sure going to be in a lot of these conversations. So,
I think that's a huge part of it is them being involved in policy change in those conversations, and it's even beyond people that work Advance. It's also their membership, right? So they're a direct reflection of their members, and that's why it's important as Black professionals, Black entrepreneurs, people in the music business sign up so that they have a body that it's almost like a union if you really think about it. You know what I mean? And it's important because when they go to fight on our behalf and fight for certain change, they're representing us and our voice and what we're looking for. And that's been the problem, is that we have not had that in the system, in our infrastructure. And beyond that, it also means that the other boards that exist, such as, let's say, CIMA, such as all the other, funding organizations, there's way more than what Gail and Aisha talked about across the country, from, BC to Newfoundland. There are funding organizations that are there to fund black artists and what they're trying to achieve. So at the end of the day, we also have to show that we have professionals in place that can also fit those roles on those boards to basically have our voices heard in those spaces. But my question is like, it's more than just like having a person on the board. Do you know what I mean? We can't have this and we can't have them create. I'm all like, you kind of get me heated here, because I'm not a fan of the diversity and inclusion boards that are happening. In my opinion, I don't think that really, unless you're giving them the actual power to make the actual changes that are needed within the system, and making sure that the money's being funneled exactly where we need it to be to actually build growth within our community. That's the only way that change will be happen. But the only other way that's going to happen is we have to be present in these spaces.
Yes. Representation.
Representation.
So, like, there has to be representation at the policy level. And that's where it starts, and on top of it, political. Like, it's very layered, it's very nuanced. I mean, we can talk all day about how art in Canada as a culture institution is birthed in racism, right? Like, every art board, organization, like the wealthy, affluent, like, it is very classist. Like, we can go on for days about that, right? So it literally starts from the top. But also, you need to affect change at every level, from staff, from the board level to the interns. Even from the intern level, you're getting someone who yachts or golfs, and like their child who doesn't need to work, right? Because their parents are taking care of them, as opposed to someone who can't afford to take a non-paid internship. Like, it's at every level that there are entries to barriers, and it's frustrating in a sense, because, right, we don't have enough of the lobbying organizations to basically make our voices heard, and thank God for advance now, but we need more advances. And I think that's the issue. Like, we operate from this scarcity model where it's like, it has to be just one of us, or like whatever. No, there needs to be a plethora of us to infiltrate. Like, this whole crabs in a bucket mentality.
It's a both end.
It's almost like we need.
And the change has to be. Sorry, go ahead. Every time I talk, you talk. We're on the same floor.
We're all very passionate. I just want to get a quick point in, is that, we need to normalize the language of systemic racism, white supremacy, anti-Black racism, because the only way for it to change will be like organizations like CIMA acknowledging and committing to change, to partnering with Advance, so that the voice is more powerful. Because the voice has been there, hasn't necessarily always been heard. We're in a special moment now where there's momentum, and white leaders need to buy into partnering with Black-led initiatives to make real change.
Because you can be on the board, and you can be a representative, and it could be performative, where there's an issue that arises and you call out the issue, and the rest of the board still doesn't listen to you and takes no measures. Why? Because it cannot be that this action that they made is actually racist. It can. So yes, Ian.
Yeah. So we will get into the number of people that are needed to affect change in organizations like boards, but I want to steer the conversation back to Jay and the barriers in the economic spaces, in the grant systems and the financial systems, et cetera, so that we can start to work on solutions. Jay?
So I guess I want to ask this. I mean, it can be applied all over, but obviously with Gail and Aisha's experience seeing the applicants, do you feel Black artists are currently applying and receiving funding at the same rate as others? And if not, why?
So Black applicants are applying, but are they applying in the volume that I would like to see in terms of it turning into recipients of funding? No, we're not getting enough. And what's the reason behind that? The reason, several reasons. One, where people feel like they're not that factor, or any of these funding associations aren't for them. So we need to change that perception with outreach. There's the educational part in terms of being educated and learning about Factor and the different programs that we offer. There's the perception of the funding agencies, and also where people think that the support of funding agencies are only for a certain group of people and it's not for them. So we do have an outreach that is going out to the communities and reaching out to them to let them know that the funding is available to them. Sorry, I'll let Aisha speak because I'm getting confused here.
I'll dovetail on the points you made, Gail. Specific to Ontario Creates, because we're an economic development agency, we have certain criteria that need to be met for applicants to apply. Currently in our new music creation program, which is the program for labels and publishers, the minimum average annual revenue is $25,000. We take that averaged over the past 2 years. We do have a flexibility and exceptions. However, sometimes the administrative burden of having to be incorporated and provide financial statements is sometimes a deterrent for certain applicants. In our program, our previous Ontario Music Fund program, which was much more robust, $15 million a year, artist entrepreneurs were eligible to apply. And that's where we saw most of the diversity of our successful applicants, self-releasing independent artists. We had a, I would say, solid BIPOC representation, particularly in the music future stream. But in terms of companies, not much in terms of Black-led companies, very few labels and managers. So that's an area where there's clearly barriers to building that level of revenue generation to even be able to apply.
It's a huge need. We need to develop more Black-owned businesses, and the same way the Canadian system has built up many of the independent labels, non-Black independent labels over the years, and there's been funding over years to develop these companies. That's an area we really need to see. We need to see and speak to any of the Black creatives and entrepreneurs that are on this call. We need you setting up your incorporations and getting into business. We need Black management companies. We need Black publishers. We need to add that to the Canadian dynamic. And we are seeing this. This is the other thing. It is happening. I see it through some of the stuff I do with the grants and some of the stuff with the artists I'm working with at E1, where you have young Black entrepreneurs starting great companies and developing. Again, OVO was started as an independent Black-owned company,
But what's lacking is mentorship. There's mentorship that is lacking. There's access to capital. There's predatory and subprime lending. There's so many different barriers that are happening that it's making it difficult for these businesses to succeed. So how are they going to get there?
So can I ask you a quick, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Amara.
I was just saying that goes back to age-old things of redlining, of like banks, let's just talk about that, right? Loans, right? And I think it's a good point. I've used this mandate for the past years, ever since Ty who used to be at Factor, who's on here. He said something to me about, it's about providing privilege for the underprivileged. And instead of all of us saying we need this X, Y, and Z, right now the city of Toronto, just to give an example, right now the city of Toronto said $2 million over 4 years for advance. Compared to what other institutions that have been grandfathered in, right? What is $2 million?
Thank you.
Right? And so this is where they need to look at that and say, we need to provide privilege to the underprivileged. That number, they can't start that low.
Yeah.
Right? If it was maybe 10 years ago, sure.
Yeah.
Right?
So
Sorry.
we need to go to a start.
Part of it is legacy networking, and
Yep.
we get left out of that if we're not part of it, right?
Which is why I want to get to the top levels of this conversation in terms of Amara's point, which is representation. Who are on these boards, and what number of people need to be on these boards to change board culture? If the decisions that are being made about Black music are not being made by us, who are they being made by, and how can we change this? Can you guys speak to that in your respective spaces? What does board representation look like at Ontario Creates and Factor and SOCAN, and then these organizations across the country?
I just need to add, because the way the questions are asked will determine sometimes the answers that we get. Now, we just got done saying that there was a little bit, like a trickle of money given to an initiative. $2 million is not enough. And this falls in line with what we have been discussing since the beginning of this panel, where we're always on the outskirts looking for incremental little tiny bits of change. So when we say, how many do we need on the board to implement change? I don't know that a number is going to affect change when the people at the top are making the decisions. I don't know that we can quantify that if we don't find a way to make people realize it's both quantitative and qualitative. So on the qualitative side, what we're talking about when we say the Canadian music industry is Black music. So it's a two-pronged answer. How do we? I'm trying to find the words to say that there's a.
When you say qualitative, do you mean like talent and professionals? Is that what you're referring to?
I'm saying that the amount of people that are in position of change will continue to make the change the way it is perceived to be necessary in the existing infrastructure for the arts. You understand? Because right now we're a minority group, we're diversity, 12% here, little 2 million there. I think we've been saying this since the beginning, it's the value of Black music that is not seen as Canadian.
Okay.
If I can just comment on that, I think we've been talking about that representation, but I think it's almost like every organization needs to have like an advanced group within its own walls. I'll talk about what we did at SOCAN. We put in place like an equity task force. So you have like non-Black, Black, and other POC people joining together to understand what are the issues within the organization and how we can make the organization better. So for SOCAN, for example, like the board is elected by its membership, right? So we as employees have no say in which, like how the board is going to be elected. So in order to have a more diverse board, well, we need to have a more diverse membership, right? So we need to put actions into place where people, other POCs, Black people will feel home joining SOCAN, and therefore will be able to vote for the board of directors, right? So it's like I said, it's almost like having within each organization that provide funding or that provide any type of services to the community, is to have within the organization like a group of people that is actually responsible and empowered to identify and build change.
Perfect.
I think that's the key.
Perfect.
So you have to put your money where your mouth is.
Exactly.
Yeah. So perfect.
Another example of that is the Fee institution, where they have a huge contemporary art exhibition on diversity. So, I mean, you can't just, it's like every grassroots movement, the bottom gets burnt out because it's like pushing from the bottom up, where real change has to start from the top and trickle down.
Not all boards, sorry, I know you want to move on, and I just want to make a really quick point just about the different ways that boards are constructed. So for example, Ontario Creates board is political appointments. So people who are in the political appointment secretariat, they submit an application, they are appointed. OMD or Ontario Creates does not select its board members. And so that's a really important point to understand about the process and how policy is truly is determined by the political leadership, and that staff on the ground are able to do things within the organizational construct. But that is how the board operates for our agency.
And I think that just lends itself back to, again, doing an audit on criteria, program guidelines, like what people who need to be on the board, like what are we looking for? Because at the end of the day, if you change the criteria from the top of the funnel, things can then change and trickle down. Like some of that probably needs to be changed, right? Maybe that should be like half civilians, half political. Like there are ways to change it for it to be more favorable for the communities that they're serving. Right now, it's not.
I agree.
And note that like Aisha was saying is every board has a different structure of how they elect people to the boards. But what I challenge everybody that's on here, the 200 people watching right now, is the great thing is all boards have all their stuff online showing who's on those boards. It's not hard. Like, I don't really need to come here and ask all of you to say, like, how many Black people are on a board. We all can go on Google and you will see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I want to like try and, because we're an hour and 40 minutes into this conversation, and it's critical that we get to some solutions. So in terms of the board's representation, et cetera, what would happen if we were more represented in those staff and board positions? What changes would you see in the industry? And for those working in the organizations where you are a minority, can you speak to your personal experiences and share any examples of how representation has changed the culture and the outreach in these organizations?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely start when it comes to MVP project. If you look at all of the music videos that have been funded, the majority of them have been Black. They've been POCs, women, men, and that is because we switch up the jurors. We switch up the jurors consistently. People who are on the jury are people who touch the culture. They are young tastemakers. They work in this. They influence the culture, and it's not it's not people who have been in the industry for 20 plus years. You know what I mean? And even the issue with that as well, like there's so many things that come into that, because those people who have been in the industry for 20 plus years are not being moved up, right? And which creates a problem. Mm-hmm. So, I can go on for days, like I said, but in my experience, that's what it's been. And even from, just working on events, we're trying to give privilege to underprivileged kids. When we're going to I'll give RBC, for example. When we did OVO Summit, we had to look through all of the foundation's partners, and half of them were not catered to the Black community. So I wasn't no, you guys aren't getting invited. Yep. Right. So but that means that you have to have people at the table like us. Yep. There. Right. So I think yep. That's a change that I have been able to see and a change that I've been able to make. And personally, but again, there needs to be 50 of me. I can't be the only one.
Yes.
It's that, and you have to be about that. Like I can clearly see that when you're on a board, the usual is not going to go. It's not going to be business as usual. Yeah. And change takes courage. You can be the lone woman, the lone Black person on a board, and call out for change and be completely dismissed. So you have to be there. You have to represent, and you have to be about it, where you're like ready to give up your seat because they're not following the lip service, like they babin.
Yeah. So again, amazing discourse. But I want to steer, because we have a panel on organizations and structures later on, but I want to steer the conversation back towards economics. Jay, do you want to talk about banks, corporate sponsorship, and endorsements? You want to go there?
Yeah, and maybe we can lead this with Amara with her great experiences. Do you feel Canadian major corporations are putting the sponsorship money to support Black businesses and initiatives? We obviously see in America, there's so much corporate endorsement that goes on within Black music. And do you feel it's the same climate here in Canada?
No. There's
period.
Just period. There's no, absolutely not. And, I have listen, I have dear friends in the corporate music industry, from Live Nation to MLSC. I respect and love everything they do, but it comes from a very biased lens, right? But they also are trying to figure out their target and what they're trying to, and their consumers and what they want to hear. But at the end of the day, that lens also needs to be opened up as well when it comes to brand corporate sponsorships, because I love you guys, but not everything can go to the Arkells. Like it needs to be diverse. Like it just needs to.
And what are some of the criteria some of these corporations are looking at? Like when you were looking at it in terms of what you're sponsoring, what are they looking at?
And this is where it gets sticky, because reputational risk is a thing, right? So when you look at the hip hop industry and you look at violence and what it is, like brands are like, oh no, we can't be associated with that, or like the dancing or the whatever, but you can be associated with EDM concerts where people are overdosing.
Yeah.
Like what is it? Like it's just like, what is the actual problem here? Like let's just talk about it. Like I just want to have an open dialogue on these issues, so then we can at least all come together and being like, this is what it is. Because right now, like the bias is very, very, very loud, and we're tired.
But when you talk about advertising and sponsorship dollars and that kind of thing, this is where I think G987 came into the industry and kind of changed the perception, because there were corporate companies that came in and started advertising, big companies like Walmart and J&J, and they were able to see that their campaigns were very successful with the eyes being looked from Black people. Like Black people have dollars and money to spend. And you can have success using Black people to help promote your company or your products. There is success there.
Yeah, just real quick, I saw that kind of trajectory. I worked at G987 for about a year and a half as well, and I can speak to the amount of education that was necessary when Flow launched, in terms of many advertisers being afraid to advertise on the station for various concerns and lack of understanding of the genre and the culture, and how broad the consumption base was for the culture. So a lot of the educational work that was done then wound up, helping in terms of
I think I'd like to take a moment to speak from the entertainment side, because as a 20-year veteran of the entertainment thing, I've seen the systemic biases. And, Amara speaks a lot about representation, and is critical that the people who are in the decision-making places have an understanding of the music that it is that they are sponsoring and producing. And so you see things like reggae festivals and things like hip hop festivals and things like R&B festivals that they believe do not have a universal appeal. And so they have a non-urban dictate, and they are like, we don't want to be associated with anything in particular. But as Amara said, they will be associated with EDM. They'll be like, oh, violence in hip hop, but they'll be associated with things where there are overdoses. And so even in the economics of racism, we have to talk about the people who are in positions of power at these sponsoring companies and at these alcohol companies, and et cetera, because as Amara has pointed, they like the music, they like the culture, they like to do the dances, but they don't like the people. And so you have companies, and I won't call anybody out, but you have companies who have DJs who are actually the winning DJs for the year, and they have not sponsored one event inside the city because that DJ is from the Caribbean, right? And so you see this perpetual racism in the economics. How can these festivals grow and become larger? Back to Jay.
And just adding to that, and again, when I compare it looking, into our American counterparts, these companies are investing because they know it's profitable, and they know Black music and Black culture is influencing what people are buying.
Yes.
So I think a deep part is, I can't remember who said it, is a lack of understanding. And hopefully the Canadian industry can wake up and realize that this is pop music. This is profitable, it is viable. If you develop and invest in it, you are going to see fruits of labor.
And Jay, it is a lack of a... Go ahead, sorry.
Just to quickly add, what happens is when the Canadian industry doesn't support them, when there aren't record label signing, when there aren't management companies there, and again, I'm personally, I'd love them all to be Black-owned companies. We're talking about Canadian companies, but that's, you know, if there aren't record labels investing, if there aren't publishers investing, if there aren't management companies supporting them, where do they go? They take their IP to America.
And they
all of that
become
revenue-
funded.
Sponsorship is tied to value. It's
Yeah.
tied to your image and it's tied to your goodwill. So if you have constructs in a country that does not value urban music, it's normal that the corporate money's not going to follow. It's not a separate conversation. It's the same one. And when we said earlier at the beginning of this conversation that we really ought to have an audit as to how much Black music brings in terms of everybody's dollar. So we can see that in terms of a culture, because it's not only music, it's the culture, it's the swag, it's the dance, it's the arts, it's a way of living. Like, to see how much this brings to the table, then, you know, naturally the sponsorship money is going to follow because your image is.
Well, I can say I know from working within Advance that is like one of the that is top priority is really getting the data, because the data helps us with everything that we need to do on every platform, from radio to economics to professional development, you name it, you know. So I can't vouch that is something that's happening, but I do want to go, because I know we don't have too much time. I was saying to Ian offline, we really need to start, you know, grabbing more into like what are some steps that we can be taking to make the more of a changes beyond just data. What are other things that we can be doing, you know?
But speaking of data, at Factor, we're currently pulling data. We're asking our artists, our artist managers, the jurors, all of our contacts in our system who haven't identified their self-identifying information, and there's thousands. We're currently in the midst of asking them, please fill out that information, because in order for us to say, well, there isn't this amount of people applying from this group or that group, we need that information filled out so we can accurately talk about what is happening with our system, who's applying, who are the recipients, and where we need to make change. Who are the priority groups, and what do we do next?
Whitney.
Very important. Please, when you get those emails, fill out that information.
Yeah, Whitney.
I totally agree, because at the end of the day, it will bring us back to return on investment. And as soon as we can prove that we as Black culture can have a solid return on investment, we're going to be able to eliminate barriers of entries. And I had a specific example that Amara kind of like woke up in my head, like venues. When you have like hip hop artists in venues, and in front of the venues, you have 40 cars of police. 40 cars of police in front of a venue because it's a hip hop music playing. And you're, like you said, I've been to punk and to rock shows, and let me tell you something. These shows are way more dangerous in certain capacities than any hip hop shows that I've been to.
I went to
any of them.
The music festival, you will never find me. That's the most violent place for a Black person possible. Absolutely.
Yeah. And because of work, I had to go to all that. And honestly, I enjoyed myself. So that's the point. That's not the point. But the perception of violence that is like towards hip hop artists and towards hip hop venue has to stop. And in order for that to stop, I think you guys are right. Like, if we can bring data that we'll be able to share, yes, with any industry and association and so on, but also with the government. Because for me, it's not normal that you have 40 cars of police in front of a hip hop venue when you have like hard rock music playing on the side door, and you have people literally throwing each other out of the window, but there's no police there. You know what I mean? So
I think that has to do with the values that are vehiculated with popular, like with a certain strata of Black music. Okay, and it's always the same.
It's more than Black music, though. Look at the data that just came out yesterday at the police. This is a systematic, you know,
absolutely
systemic thing that's happening against our skin, no matter what.
Yeah.
We're saying the same thing.
And it's the media too.
Just one illustration. Early on, when I was still a kid, I was like, okay, we're going to do a hip hop festival. You know, I was in charge of the Canada Day festivities. We're going to have a portion. We're going to lock in a portion of the island. We're going to get all the MCs in, and they're going to perform, and it's going to be amazing. In 2 days, the security budget was quadrupled. I had to meet with the chief of police twice. Questions after question of, is it safe? 20 years down the line, I'm working as an attorney on a Black film on gang. The attorney next to me is like, yeah, but we're doing the E&O for it and we're doing all the clearance and the financing. What if they show up? I'm like, what if who shows up?
Yeah.
And
the reality is, if you go to any major hip hop show, it is a very diverse crowd.
Yeah.
So of course, no one
secure and safe.
White people at hip hop shows.
Yeah.
Sorry guys. I think we're starting to we're getting
No,
into
but that's it though. That's it. You
backyard
gotta talk.
conversation.
You gotta say
I
it.
understand. I understand.
Well,
However, we need to get to solutions. And so I want, because we have exactly 23 minutes left. And so I want to throw to each of the panelists, and in your respective spaces, I would like to ask you what you would like to see changed in, and what you think the solutions for change are in the Black anti-racism, in the Black space, like specifically in economics, in entertainment. I'm going to throw to Montreal and go to Whitney first.
Sure. I think the main thing is, for me, the creation of like every organization should have an advanced department, like an equity task force, call it as you want, but within your walls, you need to have people, Black people, non-Black people at every level of the organization, with some type of empowerment in order to first identify the gaps within that organization and bring solution to that organization. I think this is key. If we do not have representation within our own roles, I'm talking about each organization, it's impossible to do whatever. Like, you know, if there's no equity task force where I can feel comfortable to say, guys, we have one Black executive, like at the CEO level, the executive level. That's not normal. But the company has created like a safe place for me to say that. You know, in other organizations, this is not the case, where nothing is going to change if you don't have representation at every single layers of organization up to the board. So I think the first thing, and the only thing actually for me, is going to be representation, an actual tangible thing to do. Create your own task force, man. Like people within your organization at every level of department, and at every level and in every department, that will be able to speak the truth about the actual and tangible issues that Black people are facing.
Okay, and have teeth. Okay, yeah. Aisha?
That's cool.
Yeah, I think one thing I wanted to just mention in terms of impact that staff on the ground can have, and something that I kind of brought to my team when we launched the music creation program, which after the fund was reduced from 15 million down to 7 million, was going to leave out artist entrepreneurs. We did put in place an exception for BIPOC artist entrepreneurs to qualify to apply as a record label, sort of in recognition of the systemic barriers that limiting the applications to labels and publishers would pose. So I did want to put that out there as a tangible idea that I brought to the table that was very well received by the team. And there's a desire to make those changes, and you know, the more staff that are raising their voices, and especially in this time where there's more of a willingness to implement and act and move, that's a tangible example that I can cite there. In terms of tangible change, things that we've spoken about before, I know that we have tons of reports, we've gathered tons of data, and we are exhausted with that, but I can speak to the fact that particular types of data move particular needles. So in the sense of, I'll give another example. It's not a Black focused example, but it's an example of how advocacy created change in the age of COVID-19, where the Canadian Live Music Association advocated for a piece of the relief funding that was not initially designated to the live music stakeholder group. And data was key to them being able to drive home the point of why some of that funding needed to flow. Again, I say this knowing that joint voices to help amplify Black voices and Black arguments is an important part of the puzzle in affecting some of those similar changes, but continual data gathering is key to having effective advocacy. Okay. Ontario Creates has a diversity and inclusion task force, and there are things that we've identified that we can improve on, and that's an ongoing process. And I think that you know, the willingness to listen and the leadership opening the door to those difficult but healthy conversations is something that we are committed to.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to throw back to Montreal and go to Stéphane. Barriers that you see to Black people in the economic space and solutions that you would like to see implemented.
As a practitioner, I think professional development, like to raise the IQ in terms of business and legal affairs so that there's more IP retention, wealth. And also, we didn't touch on that on this discussion, but you know, the business model of the record industry is really like a study in trickle down economics, like the 1% on top, then chunk after chunk after chunk after chunk of your money disappears until you're left with a little bit of money. So it's a huge opportunity right now to reassess why the contracts look the same as they did virtually 20 years ago when we keep talking about change. So it would be after the artist acquires some knowledge after the professional development, it would be nice for them to trade with labels that let them keep some of that money.
Okay. I'm going to go to, did we go to Gail yet? Gail? Barriers, economic barriers to Black people in the entertainment industry and solutions that you can see and changes that you would like to see made.
So the changes I would like to see, I like to see us partnering up more with community organizations and creating workshops and panel discussions for people to understand what Factor is about, the programs and how they can access it. What I did for the team that I manage, I created client-facing meetings where we put a call out on our social media platform asking people or telling people that the PCs, which is project coordinators, are available to chat if you have any kind of questions about our programs and how to access it and how to apply. Because I think a lot of people in our community, again, like was mentioned earlier, don't feel like they're inclusive and they're included and they should be accessing the funding. And the type of response that we got from that was really good. And people are coming in, they feel like there's a face to who Factor is and they feel welcomed. And now they're gonna go back to the community and say, you know what, Factor people, they aren't that bad. There's, you know, I spoke to whoever and they're very helpful. So that kind of thing I'd like to see. The data gathering, I think, is very important for us to understand what is happening, who's actually applying, the number of people that are applying from the priority groups, and where we need to improve. And then when it comes to the recipients, who's actually getting funding and what can we do and how can we improve in those areas. And the other thing that we can look at is the eligibility rules we have for our programming. And if there's any areas where it's keeping certain groups out of being able to apply because of maybe the type of revenue we're asking for from certain groups and they're not making that kind of revenue within their business. And yeah, that's the kind of things I'd like to see changed.
Okay, perfect. J Dev, I'm going to pull you out of your moderating role and ask you the barriers that you see in all the spaces and the suggestions and solutions that you would like to see implemented, the suggestions that you have and the solutions that you that they ultimately will provide.
A lot of these, some of these are going to tie into what some of the other panelists have eloquently said, but I mean, the first one to me is I'd like to see Black creatives and entrepreneurs network more with each other and build a strong network here in Canada, where we have some solidarity amongst each other. And as we see from the panel members here, there are amazing Black professionals in the music industry here in Canada that people can lean on for information. We need to network with each other and build. So that I'd like to see in the existing organizations. You know, labels, publishers, organization, I think, you know, as Amara really nailed, is representation and having us, having more Black people in these buildings, and not as a handout, because if you're selling music, it would be smart and in your invested interest to get Black people in the building that understand the culture of one of the most, you know, music and various musics that can do really well here, instead of that IP leaving Canada and going to America because they understand. So I'd like to see more of that. And I think if we have more Black representation at these organizations, you know, I think Whitney alluded to, you will automatically see more outreach. because there's people speaking on behalf. And this is what a lot of these panelists are doing who are on here. So that, as Stephanie said, is professional development of Black businesses, more outreach to Black-owned businesses and organizations, and finding out, because there are a lot of people in our community doing amazing things. It's not that they don't exist. They're out there. We just have to connect with them, as Gail said, and connect more with them and develop stronger Black managers, Black promoters, Black, label owners, etc. So I'd like to see that. I'd like to see, I'd like to see more investment into Black-owned businesses within the music space. There are a lot of funds from these organizations that are available for these businesses. So I would like to see a lot more development into, just like we've seen with many of the legacy independent labels here in Canada and many of the legacy artists. I would like to see development dollars into developing stronger Black-owned businesses. Corporate Canada, invest in Black businesses because we influence culture. They get it in America. If you go to any high school, you'll see. I think it's corporate Canada kind of waking up and not being scared, and understanding that we actually do influence culture and make people buy products. And lastly, which I think is a big one, is just, to Amara's point, is an audit and to get the data so we can use that towards creating policy change. And that is needed with the lobby groups like Advance, like CIMA, and the other organizations, these lobby groups that have Black interests in mind, going to bat for us to make sure that using this data, which I think it will show that how influential Black culture and music is. So those are some of the key things.
Okay. I'd like to throw to my partner, Click, from the artist management and consulting world. What barriers do you see? Sorry? I'm gonna let Amara conclude.
Okay.
What barriers you see to Black artists in the economic space in terms of obtaining capital, et cetera, what suggestions you have and what the outcomes and solutions of those would be?
I actually think that there needs to be a new program developed strictly for development of entrepreneurs and Black ownership. And there's a lot of space where artists can learn about being an artist. There's a lot of different, workshops and panels all the time, but there's nothing that's really cultivating roles in the business, from being an accountant to being a tour manager to being a promoter to owning a media outlet. Could be TV, it could be radio, it could be anything. We need to actually have some sort of system. I would love to see some type of fund that actually is created to actually develop our community to be in that position, because a lot of the problem is we kind of help, but we just kind of put our foot in the water and then we dip out. We need actually full commitment that will take somebody from A to B and actually put them in a spot in a role, or give them actual money for investment, be it, coming from VCs or angel investors, wherever it is. We need to actually have something in place that actually brings us to be the next Berry Gordy's, the next, Kevin Lyles, the next whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. And Amara, I'm closing with you purposefully.
Ooh, girl, I can't wait for this.
The revolution, I'll say this in front of the entire world. The revolution will be staged and carried by Black women. Because where Black women go, everyone follows. They open the door for everyone to have a space. And so young Black women like Amara, if given the opportunity to speak and have positions, and this is why representation matters, can change the world. So Amara, I want you to finish.
That is so nice. It's tough. I could go on for days.
Go on. We have some time, and then I'm going to thank Aisha, who has to leave at promptly at 3. But we are going to continue on, and then I'm going to take some questions.
Okay. One thing I need Black business owners and people who have reached like the heights of their careers to run. Like, we need Black people running because at the end of the day, as Aisha said, it starts at the political level. And those are the people that set the mandate. And you can hire as many Black people you want on a board, on your staff. The culture is still going to be violent towards Black people because it's not made for us. So that's why the criteria and the program guidelines have to change. And that only happens with policymakers up at the top. So, I mean, politics is not fun, but someone's got to do it. So then all the Black organizations, businesses can all like gather around and uplift that person, so then our needs can be met and heard. But that's never going to happen until people or someone does.
Okay, and that's all. I know you have more. You can go.
And just keep going.
Come on, girl.
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to like, you know, privilege and the underprivileged. I really do think like, I know we'll always get stones thrown at us about like affirmative action, or we're going to give you know, privilege to just Black people. But I mean, we built this country, we built, you know what I mean? And our cultures continues to steer the landscape culturally and profitably and just from all angles. And we're still on the fence, like on the outside. We can spout diversity and inclusion all day long, but diversity and inclusion in the corporate world means white women, right? So even when you say that, we need to be very specific on when we say diverse inclusion for who? Who are we including in this, right? There needs to be, again, privilege for the underprivileged. I need explicitly companies to say Black people, like that, and Black funding, you know, because at the end of the day, like Canadian Arts Council, they need to have some sort of genre or whatever for Black music. It's not there yet. That's at the top of the funnel, and there's nothing for Black R&B, rap, or hip hop to be included. Okay, fine. Hip hop has been here for like 40 plus years, but make the inclusion. Include us. We're being excluded because we do not fit within the parameters, and that needs.
It is poetry.
Amara, I think your political nominating committee has already formed. So
actually, I'd like to jump off one of the points that Amara made, and I actually want to. I touched on this earlier in the conversation in the use of the word urban. The word urban has systemically separated us from our brothers in the Caribbean and in Africa as well. And so a lot of the times when we're having these conversations, we are talking about hip hop, R&B, and related musics, but we are not talking about soca, reggae, Afrobeat, and the others. And so that was the first thing that came to mind as you mentioned, hip hop and R&B. The second thing is that I believe, and I think that it's critical that we understand our power. I go into meetings with corporations and they say silly things to me like, it would be in your best interest to associate with a viable brand. And my response to them is, so would it for you. Because I am the viable brand. We are the culture. We create the culture and shift every aspect of anything that you see in the world today. And consequently, this conversation is about representation as well as it is about self-determination, being able to do what needs to be done with our music that we create in the spaces that we create it. And so this is a panel on economics, and it's like, we are taxpayers, but we are also on the outside, and we have a right to certain things. And so this conversation will be staged from many directions. You have Jay Devonish with like grant organizations on the outside, but he's on the inside. Aisha, Gail, Whitney, everyone here, Stefan, right, who are on the inside and the outside, but this has to come from every direction. And so to Click's final point, join Advance, because it will create a community of like-minded individuals and networking. And I don't know if there's any final comments, but I want to throw a question shortly. And it is 2:52. I want to thank Aisha. Do you have to dip, Aisha?
I'm good till about 3.
Okay, so we have 8 minutes. With me.
Real quick, because you said something and I had to jump on it, man. You said let's not forget about our Caribbean. I'm from the Caribbean. I was born in Guadeloupe, and the African brothers. Africa is a huge continent,
baby. Yeah,
man. We're talking about billions of people listening to the kind of music that we love, and the kind of music that is now popping in the world. billions. Like that's a, and I think like the more we're going to recognize that, and the more that we're going to acknowledge that this is only, like you said, not only hip hop, R&B, but there's a huge other type of market that is quite unexplored for us. And as soon as we're going to start also building bridges with Africa, like Black, music and Black culture and Black economics will take a big jump. I can assure you, because even on the French level, people in Quebec, Stéphane will understand that in Quebec, Quebecers always think about France as the El Dorado. Like, we need to go to France in order to have
Always
success.
forget about the francophonie.
Yeah, it's 70 million people.
All
Let me
the
tell you.
islands, le Liban.
Africa, 400 million francophones. Hey, that's not even the same thing. You know what I mean?
But
so we need to start
isn't
acknowledging
that
that.
a great example as to why these conversations are necessary? Why is it that people think francophonie automatically France, and then they admit the global francophonie that
they don't get it? Yeah, 100%.
Yes.
100%.
And then even talk about the crossover for music for that, right? Like the markets that are booming. Sure, Nigeria is at the top. You know, like we're there, but there are other markets that can cross over, especially in the francophone Sinhalese. I literally just had this conversation yesterday with a label head in Africa, and it was just like, there are so many ways that they can cross over. And it goes down to like the Grammy category of like Burna Boy is in world. Why is he not in Afro? Like that makes no sense. Right? So this is like, it goes down to like creating, it's like changing the guidelines, changing the criteria, right?
So what does that even mean, world music? What does that mean, world music?
It's
nothing.
Yeah, broaden and then specify. Like there can be Afrobeat, there can be like, it just needs to get, as there's country, folk, rock, like there needs to be that as well for us.
Yeah, like think about it, world's music. What the hell does that mean? Like, what does that mean?
That's
like,
my other thing.
Like, as soon as you don't know where to fit the kind of music that is actually Black music for most of the time, you put in world music. That is an offense. Like, for me, I don't understand why people haven't like gotten so mad about it, because it's an offense.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're passionate about that
one.
So this is where your your panel just
yes.
off. This is where
one of the aspects that we didn't really get to, and I want to talk about this quickly, is that it's very difficult to build a castle in someone else's kingdom. I want to take a moment quickly, while Aisha's still on the call, to talk about the development of Black business. Jay Devenish has pointed this out a lot. For us bias, how do we self-determine in the creation of Black businesses in the entertainment community, and how do we fund those economically, venture capital, angel investment, etc., as well as grants, etc.
He said it when in his address. It's more than, I'm sorry, I'm talking about my experience. I take time off and I give my services pro bono to whoever I can help, so I can just give them a little bit of structure. But there's no one in place right now, that no conferences, no one is paid to do this. So both Jay and both David touched on it, saying, he'd love to see a little bit more money funneled into professional development for Black business.
Okay, I think she froze. Did you freeze? Okay, there you are. And so, running off of Stéphane's point, I feel that there is an obligation, and Amara was nodding her head when I say that we're taxpayers, that I don't think, and Jay has stated this numerous times, we don't want a handout. We just want to start at the same starting place as everyone else. And consequently, exactly. And so what can be done on the part of organizations, corporations, and businesses in terms of development, professional development, mentorship, and all of these things, education in terms of economics to get us there?
I guess I'll just, my parting words will be, as I mentioned, our agency is kind of going through a wholesale analysis of our programming. And again, it's not just music, but it's all of the creative industries that we support. And the issues facing the book publishing sector in terms of BIPOC representation and the issues facing the digital media sector are quite different than those facing the music sector. So we do have a lot of issues to tackle, but I think one of the strategic plans that we're discussing is how can we use some of the strategic funding to go towards targeted programming that's going to have a direct impact on some of the underserved communities. So that type of work is in development from the funding side, because everything in this conversation is a both and. It's helping to fuel the pipeline, because the future will look the same as it does now if we're not helping to seed the young people. And while we have an economic development focus, and that's not typically our mandate to support education at the beginning level, we are open to creative ways of finding ways to fuel the pipeline. So that's something that we're committing to, and it's a work in progress for sure.
Okay. Sorry, can I just want to thank Aisha, because she has to jump off, and I'll come right back to you, Jay.
Sorry.
Aisha, thank you so much.
I have a mommy duty to take care of, so that kind of jumped.
We appreciate your presence.
There should be a statue of you, literally, like pioneering the Canadian music industry. Like there's some like commemoration. This is insane.
Thank you very much.
I'd just like to thank you for your involvement. Quickly, I also would like to acknowledge Jill Andrew. Amara was talking about politics. Jill was one of my students at the Scarborough Black Education Organization almost forever. And this is why representation matters. Back to Jay.
Thanks.
So just adding on your thing about, what can be done to develop more Black businesses. In speaking from the grant perspective, the first thing that I instruct anybody trying to get into the grant space, and again, if we want to be where our, the non-Black labels who are getting regular funding and artists that are getting funding, the key things that I'd say simply is register your business, your incorporation ideally, and do your financial statements each year. Both the envelope fund with Factor and the Ontario Creates OMIF grant require those financial statements. And it's often the criteria that's been holding back many people from applying. So it's not a process that you can jump in, start a record label, and you're getting funding from the envelope fund at Factor, and you're getting, these are processes that you have to build up. And so I encourage everybody to do the research, and let's start some Black-owned publishing companies and Black-owned management companies and labels. But my words of advice are get the incorporation done and get your financial statements. And maybe, Stefan, you can speak more.
I would like to echo my homie Jay here, because both of us have been in this space chasing money for years and have been successful at it. And we both recognize, and the reason why he's saying this is because we both recognize and see that there's a lack of people applying. And we know that the reason for that is a lot of the things he talked about. So I just want to echo and say that the opportunities at our doorstep, we just need to access it. And it's not as hard as you may think. I'm sure if you hit up Jay, you hit up me, we do consulting. So it's like, it's not hard.
Not even that, call Factor.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you guys again. Stefan has to leave. I just wanted to tell you thank you so much. Ça passe.
Merci.
So thank you for blessing us with your information, and please tell people how they can reach you.
Oh boy.
Okay, don't worry. All of this information will be on bdrb.ca. Thank you so much, Stefan.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to jump back to thank you. Thank you so much. Blessings.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, Gail.
Part of what Jay and Click were saying is about the lack of confidence people have in the system. So because they don't have confidence in being awarded any funding, they don't bother. So I would encourage everyone that's listening to please reach out to Jay and Click. They can help you understand the process and help you, like you said, Jay, with your financial statements and registering your business in order for you to be eligible for certain fundings.
And even to add to that, all of these organizations have people there. There are program coordinators, Factor, that you can call at any time. You can
ask
call
questions.
The program director at the arts councils are there that you call. So I encourage everybody, even if you feel it's a daunting process, call, find out, get over those humps, apply. The opportunities are there in front of us, and we need to take advantage of that and make sure that we're applying. So don't be scared to call and ask questions. These funds are there for you. We are paying tax dollars to access these funds. So don't be scared to call and ask questions. Even if, I mean, now we're in COVID, but you can call and sit down. Gail, I know you've been doing more outreach of getting the coordinators to actually speak to more people directly. So don't be scared, guys.
And two things I wanted to say.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead,
Gail.
and then I'll let you guys speak. So Factor, our mandate states that our commitment is to reflecting the diversity of the Canadian population in our programs, as well as in our operations. So we really mean it when we say on our website, that is our mandate. So we're trying to improve and make changes. We're in the midst of trying to make change and improvement in those areas. And the other thing I want to say is that in order for you to learn what type of paperwork we're looking for or how to do a marketing plan, be a part of our juror system. So you can go on our website. Yeah, there you go. You can sign up through the Factor portal. You have to sign up as a user. And then within the user profile, there's an area that says if you're interested in being part of our juror system, and you go through there, you fill out the questionnaire. We're looking for people that have at least 5 years experience within the music industry and with at least 2 years of most recent experience to become an accredited juror. So go on there, take a look, join up, and that way you can actually have an idea of what we're looking for.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to add is like,
yes.
Once you have the information, it's great to have the information. And like Jay was saying, call, man. Like, for example, at SOCAN, people are coming to my office all the time. You know what I mean? People are there to give you the information, but it's critical to act on it. Like the music business is 2 words, music and business. Once you get the knowledge and the information and you don't do anything about it, this is wrong too. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, it's like any other career. Like if you wanna become like, I don't know, a banker, well, you're gonna have to learn finance or economics. You're gonna have to learn it in order to give people a good service. It is not enough to make music. You have to understand how it works. You have to understand the business. Once you know all this information, like the SOCAN of the world, the Factor and everything, you need to get your head around it and get into the process. You need to, this is your life, this is your career. And as we were saying now, as Black people, you're not only doing it for you, you're doing it for the community, right? So that sense of empowerment should be like joining you right now, because once you get the information, you have to act on it. Like Jay was saying, after that call, if you don't have a company set up, well, you should make that appointment and you should go set that up tomorrow. Now, if you don't understand rights, well, you're gonna have my coordinate. You should contact me. And I feel like I'm gonna end with saying that there's no more excuses. Once we have the information, we have to do something about it, and we have to do it for us, but for the community.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to add to that point where I actually do think that the responsibility is on a lot of these institutions. Like,
yes,
record labels can't be giving out these major advances to people who have never had money before and have no idea how to use it. Financial literacy needs to be ingrained in these institutions. Just like how it's starting to now be a part of the educational systems, it needs to be a part of these institutions as well.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah,
and that's actually, it's a really good point. I actually think like that'd be something that we bring up with advance from a standpoint of having like how you have legal aid, like having somebody you can actually go to that actually advises, oh, you got this type of deal, or you have this type of thing, advise you on what you need to do to actually protect yourself and invest in yourself and make the money work for you.
Yeah, the NBA, the National Basketball Association, has implemented that for all of their basketball players, because you have people who are coming into the league getting millions of dollars and don't know how to use it. But to a point that Whitney was making, and I do agree with yourself and Jay, and I adamantly agree with the idea that once we get the education, but I do want to point out that we don't want to victim blame either, because again, we are a part of a community, and that community, those organizations and corporations have an obligation to reach out to us as well.
Absolutely.
You don't know what you don't know, and we can't blame people for not knowing them. The second thing is that the entertainment industry and the economics of the entertainment industry is an ecosystem, and consequently we need people in every aspect and area of that. A couple of years ago, I think Russell Simmons came here, he had a thing, and he was like, how many of you guys are artists? Everybody put up their hand. How many of you producers? Everybody put up their hand. No publishers, no licensing, no lawyers, no grant writers. Infrastructure needs to be built in this community, right? Reach out to people. I don't know how many of you guys do mentorship. Everybody contacts are on the BDRB website. Look for a mentor. Economic empowerment and education is the key to this conversation.
And another big element is buy black. Straight up, like it's something I'm being a lot more conscious. I mean, I've always put money in my people's hands, but I'll be real with you. Like, I was just thinking about the other day of the project I just put out. Like, I'm really proud that I hired, graphic designers, video guys, everybody I try to put in that mix is like trying to make the money go around so that we all are growing, and not just the money growing, but our expertise and our experiences grows by every project that we do. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's another thing is like, obviously looking at each other and our expertise and helping out each other,
Yeah.
100%.
And last thing I'll say is be persistent.
Yes.
Our industry, what I've noticed a lot in this country is some people get pissed off. Oh, I didn't get a grant, or I didn't get this job, or I didn't get this promoter didn't call me back, or this guy didn't call me back. You just gotta keep hitting the pavement and keep knocking on the doors until they do listen, or go through the back door, one or another.
Or simply remember that you're the one who wants something, right? So anyway, I would like to draw this to an end. Thank you all for your involvement. I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. Past episodes can be viewed at Breaking Down Racial Barriers, BDRB.ca. CIMA can be found at cimamusic.ca. Check out advancedmusic.org and look out for the upcoming episodes. Anti-Black racism in the media and the media spaces that create it is up next. Barriers faced by event producers, agents, access, venues, event spaces, festivals, and sponsorship is coming. Anti-Black racism in the creative space is coming up. Challenges faced by Black artists, systemic and systematic barriers from independent to major label artists. And very, very, very important, 7, 8, and 9, representation in corporate and organizational entertainment industry, record labels, streaming companies, and industry associations, and retention. 8 and 9, retention, how to bring new Black people into the industry, and number 9, how to advance them and get them further up, as well as how to get them into ownership. This has been Breaking Down Racial Barriers.
One thing I gotta acknowledge her, because I just noticed that she was in the comments, is Bushra from OAC. She could have actually been on this panel with all of us. She's a great, if you're a Black entrepreneur and you're trying to get development, there is a grant that you can go and to get a mentor.
I just posted that in our chat, ironically.
So yeah, she actually dropped that, and props to them for that program, for that work, that grant that's available.
Okay, and I would like to thank our presenting sponsor, CIMA, and our supporter, Advance, as well as Ontario Creates, Factor, the Government of Canada. Thank you. This has been Breaking Down Racial Barriers, and we will see you next week, Tuesday at 1 p.m. as we jump into anti-Black racism in the media and the spaces that create it. Thank you, and thanks again for you guys' involvement. We'll talk soon. All right, take care. Bye-bye.